Hello, my round 6 play of the day from the FIDE Grand Prix tournament in London is the game between Topalov and Dominguez. So far, Veselin Topalov has drawn all his games. Let's see whether he could avoid that fate in this game. Well, we joined the game quite late on after 27 moves, and you can see it's a very blocked pawn structure here. Very tight closed position. White's minor pieces are better than black's. They're very active indeed. In particular, this bishop on g7 isn't so great, but also even the light squared bishop is kind of shooting in the air. But maybe the most important thing here is that white's queen is more active than black's. Topalov has control over this open A file, and that allows him to enter into the position. So here he played queen to A5, and this is already very dangerous indeed. I might add that the players were approaching time pressure here as well, reaching the time control, which added to the tension. So there's a threat of queen d8 check. Well, okay, what happens if black plays a normal move, let's say king h7? Well, then queen d8, threatening the pawn, and if e6, then bishop f6, and this is extremely dangerous. You can see the knight is about to come in on d7, and once we exchange bishops, then the queen will cut back, or queen in here, and it's going to be mate. Queen and knight are well known as a potent attacking combination. Dominguez therefore had to defend against this by playing queen c8, preventing the check. But then white takes a pawn. Okay, so white seems to be a clear pawn up here, but matters are not so clear actually because of this move queen e8. First of all, we're attacking the bishop. Well, if white goes for an endgame, then this is really nothing. You can exchange off the bishop for the knight, and in this opposite colour bishop's endgame, it's going to be a draw, in spite of the extra pawn. There's not enough there in the position. So queen c7. Okay, now we can see Dominguez's idea. He played pawn to f6. So this is the point. The queen on e8 defends g6, so knight g6 no longer possible. c6 is also defended here. And you can see, in fact, that knight is trapped. So the position becomes very sharp now. So who's better? Well, it's too early to say, but Topalov had clearly seen this position in advance, and he'd prepared the move queen d7. Now, if black wants to play, well, kind of cut his losses here, he could exchange queens and go into an ending a pawn down. And I have a feeling that black ought to be able to draw this just by shutting out white's king. And I'm not sure that white can make progress here. He can try, you know, maybe spinning the knight around here or something like that, but I think black should be okay. But Dominguez tried bishop f7, and this sharpens the position. I have a feeling that he might have thought that he was better in the endgame that's about to result. Okay, well, first of all, if white were to exchange queens, then the knight is still trapped. This is the problem. And black should be better there. So instead of this, after bishop f7, Topalov played bishop takes f6. Dominguez took the bishop, and now Topalov took on c6. So now, okay, let's do a count. White has 3 pawns for the piece, but there are 2 bishops there, and now I think Dominguez misassessed the ending that was about to arise. He took the knight on e5. I think he should have played queen takes, knight takes, and kept the 2 bishops. And well, it's very tricky to say what's going to happen here, but I don't think black will lose. I mean, you know, all three results are possible here. Let's bring the king over. And Topalov mentioned after the game that he was maybe thinking knight a7 to attack this pawn, but of course the bishop can come to c4, and I don't see that white really gains anything by this. I think it's probably better to bring the knight back into the middle. But then let's say king e7. So we centralize the king. That means that these pawns can be controlled. And on a good day, you might find that black is even able to get in g5 and maybe force a bishop round here. I mean, black still has winning chances here. For example, if white were to exchange knight for bishop and play something like g4, well, the bishop can come round and come in here. And, well, it's all a question of tempi, but in this particular case, I think black will actually win. For example, here. And I think black is going to win this position. Okay, that's not very well played from white, but it's just an illustration that it's not only white that has chances in that endgame, but black also has some chances. Okay, but instead of this, Dominguez played bishop takes knight. Now, I think this is a time pressure decision, and I think he just misassessed what was coming. So, okay, this forces the exchange of queens. Pawn takes. So, still 3 pawns against a piece. Now, it all depends whether these pawns can be blockaded. And also the state of white's king. Can the king penetrate into black's position? It is possible to blockade these pawns, but in this case the king is able to break through. For example, here, king comes in, and black can only wait here while white forces a breakthrough. For example, let me just go on a few moves. This just tidies up the position. And now this is a kind of Zugzwang actually. King here, and now e6, and okay, if this pawn is taken, of course, then the king takes and the pawn goes home, but okay, we can basically force this. And this is Zugzwang. There's no decent move for black here. For example, if bishop f7, then we play d6 check, and well, and so on, and we take here. So basically, I mean there are lots of variations there, but my point is that I don't think black can really set up a fortress in this position. But Dominguez, clearly he planned this, and I think he must have imagined that after h4 he was should at least draw this position. Let's have a look. So his idea, of course, is to block out the king, but that enables the pawns to roll forward. Okay, the king comes across to blockade. And now g5. This is Dominguez's idea. He wants to bring the bishop to h5 and maybe gain some counterplay here. But it's all a question of timing. Can the white king get across? Okay, and Dominguez plays this, forcing the pawn forward. I think in his time pressure he hoped that he would maybe even be able to win this position. For instance, if the king comes back, then the bishop leaps round and can take these pawns. But I think he'd miscalculated. Topalov played this move very quickly, and I think at this point Dominguez went into a big think and realized that he was in huge trouble. Okay, why? Well, let's have a look. Black desperately needs counterplay. So let's have a look at g4. I think this is the critical variation. So, okay, we take this, and now the king comes round. And I think Dominguez must have imagined, when he looked at this position way back, that bishop f3 was going to be okay for him. But watch what happens. Okay, of course, well, that's the idea, of course, but the king comes in instead, and after king e5, black isn't in time. So let's see, h3, the pawns roll forward, and after this move there's no defense to d7 mate. The pawn even prevents the bishop checking. But okay, if for example instead of h3 we play bishop f3, then actually it doesn't make any difference at all. Here the pawns still roll through. Let's just see it. Black is just short. We play d7, takes, takes, and the king comes to f7, and we queen with check. One tempo short for black. Now there are other variations here. Instead of g4, you could try bishop f3, but this also fails. In fact, this is actually terribly simple, because in this position, after g4, well, I suspect e5 is, I'm sure, is winning here, but king f3 even stops the pawns before you play e5. So black just had to go backwards here. If his counterplay isn't working, then he just had to wait. So it's basically gone, this position. Okay, this is the game continuation. e7 check, but now it's terribly easy because, you know, this counterplay on the king side is never going to work while the pawns are so far advanced. So black can really only wait here while white's king strolls up the board, so the bishop has to come back to prevent these pawns queening. Of course, if king here, then we check and we go through. So the bishop comes back, and now the king just strolls up the board, and in this position Dominguez actually resigned before seeing Topalov's next move. White could win with king c5, for example. Well, black cannot hold this b pawn. That's terribly easy, and then, well, for example, the king can come here and push the b pawn home. I think if you play through the moves of this game, then at first glance you perhaps think this is a very smooth victory, but that really wasn't the case, and Topalov chanced his arm a little bit. I don't think he was ever in any real danger of losing, although the two bishops against knight ending was perhaps double-edged. But I think basically he calculated better than Dominguez. Thanks very much for watching. More Play of the Days coming soon.